Hi, it's Sarah here, and thank you so much for inviting me to record a little video for the first session. I'm really sorry I can't be there. Also sorry because I have a bit of cold, so I'm hoping this is kind of coherent enough. Um, but Emma asked me to record just a little video to share some of the thoughts that we've been having in the project team, Sense and Climate project around disability and emergency preparedness, and extreme weather events. So I have got some notes, and I hope this will be useful, but please just ask any questions by email or through Emma or whatever is helpful afterwards. So, as we know, because we're all here, the climate crisis is really creating big risks to human lives and health and livelihoods. And disabled people, which includes 16% of the global population and at least 24% of the UK population, are particularly at risk. Some research has suggested that disabled people are 2 to 4 times more likely to die or be injured in heat waves, hurricanes, and floods, for example. To some extent, these risks are because of the damaging impacts of those types of extreme weather events and air pollution on existing health conditions. But perhaps more significantly, they're because of eco-ableism. So that failure to include disabled people in climate action, or to recognize that some of the actions that are being promoted to address climate change are creating new challenges for disabled people. And disaster risk reduction and emergency preparedness strategies are really an essential part of climate action to protect people from harm and to ensure that extreme weather events and other climate risks don't stop the implementation of other climate solutions. So you don't want a big storm, for example, ripping up any kind of infrastructure that's just been put in place to make active travel accessible, for just to put an example out of the air there. And I think what we're finding most concerning is that at the moment, certainly in the UK, there doesn't seem to be much engagement with disabled people when planning how to prepare for extreme weather events or other forms of climate risks. So in the Sense and Climate project, we have started to flag a few areas where improvements are really needed. And I just thought I'd share some examples today in case any of these resonate with you. So I would say the top kind of area is the need to really work with disabled people and disabled people's organisations across the country to co-produce emergency plans and responses and risk communications in ways that recognise that, disabled people, we're not all the same. People's experiences are hugely shaped by many other forms of inequalities in everyday life, whether it's linked to income or gender, ethnicity, age, other things that might be going on. It's really important to ensure that disabled people are prepared in the face of power, water, or communications outages. We need to make sure that access to assistive devices, generators, clean water supplies, respirator masks, air filters, key medication, food supplies, all those things are sustained in the context of an emergency. And it's also really essential to make sure that the financial costs of keeping access to those key life support uh, resources are not incurred by disabled people themselves, especially given the current cost of living crisis. When thinking about what happens in an emergency, it's really important that we have accessible evacuation plans in place, and they need to contain clear information about people's specific access requirements, the types of assistance that might be needed in the case of an extreme weather event or another emergency. Evacuation needs to be a managed and inclusive process where disabled people are making a safe escape from a threat, rather than being left to be rescued by emergency services, which is often undignified and it can lead to physical injury if those services don't understand how to do that properly. And really, disabled people should be supported to be involved in the regular testing of emergency preparedness plans to ensure that they are responsive to shifting needs and priorities that people might have. think another thing that we've been working with is thinking about how to ensure that the emergency services are fully aware of who might need assistance in the context of an emergency and in slower onset emergencies as well, like energy poverty and cold homes. Without a coherent list, people will keep falling through the cracks. So emergency response teams need to be trained to ensure assistance is provided with dignity, as we said. And at present, it's difficult because disabled people have the opportunity to join what are called priority service registers of utilities providers like water and energy to ensure people's individual circumstances are taken into account in the event of an interruption to essential power or water supplies. But this requires disabled people to have the time, energy, trust, ability to keep explaining their circumstances multiple times with multiple different organisations, often without the support to do that. And as long as there aren't appropriate data sharing agreements in place between the utilities and the emergency services, then the emergency services don't have access to that information. So that's a really big area. Some other things that we've been thinking about. How can we make sure that emergency shelters and safe spaces are accessible and that the routes to those places are accessible too? And that might include public buildings, but also the homes of friends or family where disabled people might need to relocate for safety in the context of an emergency. Those concerns are important, not just in the kind of rapid onset emergencies of a flood or a storm, but also in slower onset emergencies. So, for example, when disabled people need to rely on emergency support to feel comfortable, like community warm spaces or fuel banks in the context of the cost of living crisis, or cool spaces during prolonged heat waves, people are excluded when those settings are not in accessible buildings or buildings with accessible parking and bathroom facilities, especially when those are managed informally by community volunteers and often not well resourced. And thinking about the kind of post extreme weather event or post disaster point, when a lot of work is needed to rebuild communities after storms or flooding, accessibility needs to be embedded in that process to build forward better, if you like, and avoid building new communities that are just as inaccessible as they were before. And I think extra care is needed when disabled people are relocated away from an accessible home to a location that doesn't have appropriate accessible housing or accessible community services and infrastructure. And that's a real issue given the ongoing shortages of accessible housing in the UK. And I think most importantly, well, not most importantly, but as importantly, we really need to avoid the sort of polarizing narratives, like the ones we've seen during the COVID-19 pandemic, that frame disabled people as somehow less worth saving in times of crisis. So one of our Sensing Climate participants in Bristol said, every person, every disabled person is impacted differently and impacts differently and is equally valuable and needs to be recognised and heard. We're not a problem, we're just trying to live and be part of a solution. And another participant explained, by excluding disabled people, people are missing out on a lot of rich possibilities and solutions and ways of weathering whatever this storm is going to be as we move forward. And I think disabled people, in my experience, were all really good at finding hacks and finding ways around things. And to be able to share that and for that to be part of the planning of how we live together in sort of livable futures and livable cities, I think we just need to be platforming all of those less heard and less known experiences. So I've probably talked for too long now because I think Emma said 5 minutes, but I hope something in here has been useful or might have sparked some thoughts, and I'm really looking forward to being able to stitch alongside you, even though I can't make these sessions. Yeah, thanks ever so much, and I will say goodbye for now.